Hello, everybody, and welcome to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott, and boy, do I have a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to talk about some quarterback tiers, specifically the ones handed down by Nick Wright yesterday on First Things First on Fox Sports. Also, we're going to explore Derek Jeter's final game at Yankee Stadium. We're also going to talk about Tim Duncan's Hall of Fame induction and why he just might be the most unappreciated player in the history of the game. And we are also going to talk about Drew Brees possibly being pursued as an in-booth analyst by all the major networks. So stay tuned, sit back, relax. You're listening to Final Take. Let's get it going, baby. So I don't know if you guys have ever watched First Things First, but basically it's Fox Sports' morning competitor to ESPN's First Take. Now, Nick Wright is one of the hosts on there, and he's a very young individual, and sometimes he offers a lot of fantastic takes. He's a very knowledgeable individual when it comes to the world of professional sports. Initially, when seeing Nick for the first time, I thought, this guy's got something, and he may be able to be somebody that possibly challenges Stephen A. Smith for the crown one day as best, sports analyst out there on the market. However, lately, Nick's been doing a lot of things that have really got me scratching my head and having second thoughts about those initial thoughts, right? So one of the things that Nick went and did yesterday that I didn't really agree with was he released a grouping of quarterbacks in the NFL, and he separated these guys into tiers, and really it made me think, is this guy who's considered to be the cream of the crop really this out of touch with reality? I mean, he went out there and he did some things that were completely ridiculous. And it made me think, why would you make a mockery of a task within your job if you want to be taken seriously? I don't know, maybe Nick is going stir crazy sitting at home, because really when you look at his list, there are some glaring mistakes, in my opinion. And I got a couple issues with the list. The first thing I really have an issue with is the way he separated the list. He separated people into different categories. He had GOAT status at the top, which was one individual, Patrick Mahomes, sitting up there all by himself. Now, don't get me wrong, Patrick Mahomes is absolutely fantastic. He's probably the most talented player ever to play the quarterback position, and he's got a bright future ahead of him, barring any significant or serious injury. However, you can't have Mahomes as the greatest of all time after only 3 seasons when the real GOAT, Tom Brady, is actually on the list. And where he placed Tom Brady is just disrespectful. And I'm going to get to that, but just give me a few moments, okay? So from GOAT status, he then descends down to superstar status, down to franchise quarterback status, down to serviceable, and then he's got a category all the way at the bottom, too old and too young. Well, I'm sure you guys can guess exactly where he placed Tom Brady on the list. And if you guys need any help with that, make sure you reach out to me on Twitter at MichaelScottPSM. I'll be able to help you out. But digressing back to the list and some of the things that I had issue with. Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was given superstar status above guys like Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and a few others. Now, really, Deshaun Watson, his results have been mixed at best. You can tell that there's a ton of potential for him to have an absolutely fantastic career. He has the skill set of what is becoming the modern NFL quarterback. He's dynamic and dual threat, but really it's all potential. What we need is for him to be consistent, because at this point, his performances on field have been inconsistent on a weekly basis. So really, when you think of Deshaun Watson, each week you're wondering which Deshaun Watson is going to actually show up. And now he's lost his best wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins, who's moved over to the Cardinals to play with Kyler Murray. And it really leaves you wondering, where exactly are the Texans going to go from here? My third issue with the list, because I got a few of them. Why is Jimmy G being considered serviceable? This is a quarterback who led his team to the Super Bowl last season. And there's a lot of people have been throwing the notion out there that Jimmy G is a game manager, that Jimmy G isn't a very good quarterback. They wouldn't even pass the ball in the playoffs. Well, the 49ers were busy running the ball down everybody's throat. Why did Jimmy G need to pass the ball if they were winning football games and making it all the way to the Super Bowl? The only issue really with Jimmy G is that when he got to that Super Bowl, maybe his throwing was a little rusty. He made some bad throws. He made some bad choices. And it seems like he was a little overwhelmed by the moment, which for any quarterback going there their first time, it's to be expected. Only the great ones really step up and shine in that moment. And I'm not saying that Jimmy G's not going to be great one day, but he's still relatively young in his career as a starting quarterback. And he's got a lot of development to do. But he's essentially a few throws away from being either a franchise quarterback or a superstar at this point. And Nick Wright's got him listed all the way down in serviceable, which is completely ridiculous, right? Because serviceable quarterbacks don't really take you to the Super Bowl. So my fourth issue, I've got the issue with Mahomes being alone in the greatest of all time category, while Brady's at the bottom in the too old and too young category. It's just disrespectful. Deshaun Watson being listed as a superstar, I think that's questionable. And it's also questionable where Jimmy G was placed, but there's a debate for that. There's a debate for Deshaun, and there's a debate for Mahomes. That's what makes sports so great. We can go back and forth. Now, the fourth issue is a huge issue that I have. Too old and too young category. It's completely misguided. It absolutely makes no sense, and it almost seems like Nick created it just so he could troll all the Tom Brady fans by placing Mahomes up in the GOAT category. Because at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes is not the GOAT. He is the best we've seen in recent memory, but last I checked, he does not have 6 Super Bowl championships. And he's got a long ways to go because he hasn't set any NFL records as far as career goes. There's guys still playing like Drew Brees, increasing those records. Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger still playing. Phillip Rivers still bouncing around. Now, this is what Nick Wright needs to understand. You want to talk about too young or too old, and he listed these guys as not being able to win a Super Bowl because of their age. Now, last time I checked, Tom Brady and Big Ben weren't too young when they won their first Super Bowls, or Mahomes or Wilson, who were all under 25 when winning their first Super Bowl. Hell, Troy Aikman was only 26 years old. They weren't too young. So why would you put guys like Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Dwayne Haskins, and Daniel Jones in the too young category? Because if you can win in football on any given Sunday, which could possibly be each and every Sunday, you got a shot, no matter how old you are. And that's what Nick Wright doesn't understand about football. We see all the time quarterbacks taking off in year 2 or year 3. Hell, we saw it with Jared Goff a couple years ago. Got $100 million out of it. He's since regressed, but he took his team all the way to the Super Bowl. So I'm not buying that these guys are too young to be making it or competing or winning a Super Bowl, because the proof, ladies and gentlemen, is in the pudding. Now, Nick Wright also needs to understand that 3 out of the past 5 winners of the Super Bowl have been over the age of 36. Maybe 2 guys you've heard of. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Manning did it with the Broncos. Brady did it twice in the last 3 years with the Patriots. Now, in the Super Bowl era, there have also been 16 winners of the Super Bowl quarterbacking their teams between the ages of 31 and 35. Are those guys too old? Was John Elway too old when he won back-to-back Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos at the turn of the century? I don't think so. The average age of a Super Bowl winning quarterback is about 30 years old. Really, like I mentioned, quarterbacks, regardless of age, are capable of winning on any given Sunday and leading their team to victory. So somebody please reach out to Fox Sports, maybe get on Twitter and DM Nick Wright and make sure he knows that. Because his rankings, as far as current quarterbacks go, it's absolutely ridiculous. It was pitiful. It was completely misguided. And it is an absurdity that he considers Patrick Mahomes to be the greatest of all time after only 3 seasons. We're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about Derek Jeter's final game at Yankee Stadium. You're listening to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott. Welcome back to Final Take. I just had to go get a drink of water and cool off because really I was starting to get really fired up about Nick Wright's quarterback tiers. No worries, we've addressed the issue. We've moved on. We're looking forward to the future, and we're going to talk about better moments in sports history, and they have nothing to do with Nick Wright and Fox Sports. Actually, I take that back. They do have to do with Fox Sports. This next topic, we're going to talk about Derek Jeter's last game at Yankee Stadium. Is it proof, because of that game, that fairy tales really do exist? And you might ask yourself, Mike, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? Why are you talking about fairy tales? We're talking about baseball now. Okay, so let me tell you a little run up to this here. So Sunday night, I'm sitting at home. You guys obviously know, because COVID-19's knocked out every sports league in North America, we have no professional sports currently going on. What we have is analysis shows still going on and breaking things down. And we have talk on Sports Center about leagues trying to find ways to get back in the game, get back in the action. But it's the same repeating story every single day. If it wasn't for NFL free agency and the NFL draft, I would be ripping my hair out because this would be absolutely terrible. Sports are the air we breathe. They're the lifeblood that gets the average American through their week. You got your job, you got your 9 to 5, you got your family, you're pulling your hair out. Right now you're social distancing and you're sitting at home not knowing what to do with yourself because you've watched the movie Trolls 15 times in the last 3 days. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's necessary, and it's what we need to do at this moment to get through all this so we can get back to normal life. Because when we get back to normal life, that is when we get the sports back. So for some of us who like watching the action and watching the actual games, we're starting to get that itch, right? We're like a junkie. We're starting to get that itch on the arm. We don't know what to do. There's no new action, no new highlights to drool over or share to our friends through social media on a daily basis. So what a lot of the professional sports leagues have been doing, and ESPN and some of the major networks, is they've been re-airing classic games. Now, if you're the average fan, I'm not sure whether you're excited about this to take a step back in history, or whether you're kind of like, I've already seen this, I'm ready to move on. Me personally, being a journalist, I think this is fascinating because it gives me the opportunity to go back in time and really build my portfolio covering games, whether it be via, text, whether it be via podcast, and really get in on the action that I grew up appreciating as a fan, as a child, and now I can look at it from a different perspective as a professional individual. And so the first one I've really come across that I absolutely loved, it was the same night, right? I came across the NBA's YouTube channel. They're streaming a whole bunch of classic games from the past 20 years. There's moments in Shaq's career, moments in Jordan's career. There's high-scoring games by Tracy McGrady, Allen Iverson, Carmelo Anthony, James Harden. You name it. Anybody who was a superstar in the last 20 years is getting their full games replayed on the NBA channel on YouTube, which it's absolutely fantastic. If you're part of the younger generation, you know what I'm talking about when we're talking about streaming. If you're a little bit older and you watch everything via cable network, you need to get off of cable and you need to get into the Rokus. You need to get onto the internet, get into YouTube and some of the other subscriptions there, and you have a wealth of just material and content to satisfy you all day long. And the best part about it is, other than paying for your internet connection, whether it's via your cell phone bill or paying your provider, it's absolutely free, right? Sure, you pay your $5-10 a month for Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. But get on YouTube. Get into the subscriptions. You're getting all this content for free on top of the price of your internet. So I got in there. Fox Sports was showing Derek Jeter's last game at Yankee Stadium. And let me tell you, it was really proof that fairy tales do exist, right? So watching this whole game, it was really surreal for Jeter to see his career come full circle. You could tell he was nervous. It was his last game. You know, he's one of those guys who the moment has never been too big for him, and he's always shined in the moment. I can't tell you how many highlight reel plays that we've seen over the course of time. I mean, you think of the Yankees versus the Oakland Athletics back in the day where he made that backhand play to tag to the catcher on an overthrow from the cutoff. Catcher caught it, tagged the guy out at home plate. Absolute instant classic. You're talking about Jeter running and diving in the stands to catch a foul ball at Fenway Park. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? So this moment was really surreal for not only Derek Jeter, but baseball fans in general, because this is the last time we were really going to witness greatness with our own eyes. Nobody's really impacted the game on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball like Derek Jeter, at least in my opinion, in the past 20 years on a consistent basis, right? And it's really fitting because Derek Jeter, he's a class act. This guy has never been in the media for drama, issues with girlfriends, run-ins with the law. He's carried himself both on and off the field as a professional. He's a class act, to say the least, right? And it was very fitting that in this final game that he was getting a hero send-off. Watching him on the stream on YouTube, it brought you right back to that action in 2014. It was the live game feed with the broadcast announcers, with the crowd in the background chanting, Derek Jeter, Derek Jeter, all game, standing on their feet, a sellout crowd. Jay-Z was in attendance. I mean, this was a big, big moment, if not the biggest moment for New York sports since the Yankees last won the World Series earlier in the last decade, right? And so he got the hero send-off. So Jeter goes out. It's the 8th inning, right? Top of the 9th, actually. And they're talking and discussing, how are we going to bring Derek Jeter out of this game? Is he going to get a curtain call? Is he going to tip the cap and let everybody know, thank you, I've had a great career? How are they going to do that? The Yankees are winning 5-2 at the time. Well, the Orioles are up to bat, and David Robertson blows the save, right? He allows a home run. Basically, the Orioles tie it up 5-5 on a Steve Pearce home run. And After that, so now Derek Jeter's coming up as the third batter in the bottom of the ninth, right? So immediately the first guy takes a swing, gets on, right? Guy on first base. Now the table, you can see where this shifts into being a fairy tale, is the table is being set, right? And then you have Brett Gardner coming up. Brett Gardner comes up, long reliable Yankee, and bunts over the runner on first base. So now we got a tie ball game. Bottom of the ninth, we got a runner on second base, one out. Derek Jeter is up to bat. Now, what do you think Derek Jeter does next? First pitch, crowd's chanting on their feet. Everybody's going crazy. Trademark Derek Jeter, backside single to right field. Runner scores from second on a play at home. Throw doesn't make it in time. And Derek Jeter, in his final at-bat in Yankee Stadium, is jumping up and down, rounding first base, pumping his fists in the air before being mobbed by teammates. Now, I don't know if you guys believe in karma, but for a guy who did everything the right way, somebody who was a class act, a hero amongst all the sports fans and working people of New York City, this guy was literally touched and handed down a bone from the baseball gods. And if you don't believe in that, if you don't believe in karma and you're a sports fan and you don't believe in the baseball gods, well, let me tell you, you got some serious soul searching, because on that day, at that time, back in 2014, Derek Jeter was touched by the baseball gods. You couldn't ask for a better storybook ending to a storybook career. And that's why Derek Jeter is so great, because he shines in the moment. There's a reason his nickname is Mr. November. And there's a reason why Derek Jeter is going to be considered the last great Yankee of the 20th century. We're going to take a break here on Final Take. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tim Duncan's Hall of Fame induction and why he's the most unappreciated player of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott. We've talked a little bit of Derek Jeter in Major League Baseball. We've also talked a little bit of analyst criticism with Nick Wright from Fox Sports and his quarterback tiers. Now we're going to switch up gears and we're going to talk about a little bit of NBA basketball. Over the weekend, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Kobe Bryant were all announced as the 2020 inductees into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Now, it started getting me thinking when I was thinking about this whole thing, and it made me really question whether or not Tim Duncan is the most unappreciated player of all time. And you might say, Mike, what are you talking about? Well, hear me out, okay? So, Tim Duncan was absolutely fantastic, right? From basically, the early 2000s through the later part of the second decade, right? So we're talking about when he bowed out and retired about 4 or 5 years ago. Tim Duncan put together one of the most illustrious careers, to say the least, and nobody ever talks about him. When people talk about great power forwards, they talk about guys like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett. And then, after all that, oftentimes somebody will pipe up and say, hey, what about Tim Duncan? And people will go, what do you mean about Tim Duncan? And he doesn't really get the respect that he deserves. And my thoughts on it are because, let's face it, Tim Duncan's game was never really sexy. The NBA, we're taken back now in this day and age by three-pointers, by slam dunks, by great feats of athleticism, guys shredding shifting, charging the lane, making plays happen. And Tim Duncan really wasn't much of that at all. Yeah, he could pass the ball. He could make some good outlet passes from the post. He could also go in the paint, get you some rebounds, right? But he wasn't a guy that was going to be lighting up the SportsCenter highlight reel on a nightly basis. The game was not sexy, right? Unless you're a basketball purist. Now, if you're a basketball purist, you love Tim Duncan's game, and you probably think more highly of him than a lot of these players that have come through the NBA over the past, 30, 20, 10 years, to say the least. I know when you take a step back and you think about everything, Tim Duncan, he was automatic, right? This guy, all the time, just back you down in the post, kiss it off the glass, 2 points. Again, in the post, back you down, turn around, kiss it off the glass, 2 points. And that's all Tim Duncan really was. He didn't go out to the three-point line like Dirk Nowitzki and shoot those three-pointers, right? He wasn't a stretch four. He was a power forward inside. Kevin Garnett was one of the first guys we really saw play the four from like an athletic standpoint, where he would face up with guys and take it to the rack and dunk on you, right? A lot of your other power forwards like Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, those guys games were built on strength inside, where they'd back you down, lay it up, dunk it, Tim Duncan's game was really more about finesse. It was never really about power. It was about a jab step here, a turnaround shot there. Again, kissing it off the glass, 2 points, right? So the game was not sexy in Tim Duncan's regard, unless you were a basketball purist. So it had me thinking, okay, we got to go touch base on this, and we got to really, really dive into it, right? Because the numbers don't lie. Now, when you're talking about scoring and points per game, a lot of these guys are all relatively close, right? You have Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett. Their points per game start at 25 with Karl Malone, and they descend down to 17.8 with Garnett. Now, Garnett and Duncan were guys that played on superstar-heavy teams at times, so they obviously sacrificed a lot in their career, and that's why they won some championships. Guys like Charles Barkley and Karl Malone, they never got on those superstar teams. They mostly played alone, aside from Karl Malone playing with John Stockton, but that was just a two-man show. And so obviously he was going to get more shots and more production, right? So anyway you shake down the stats, if you go into playoff all-time scoring and cumulative stats, what you're going to see is Tim Duncan take the cake, because the guy played in and won 5 NBA championships. I'm going to get to more about that in a second. And so really, when I think of Tim Duncan, he's one of the most decorated basketball players in the history of the game, right? And so it had me thinking, well, who is the other most decorated player in the history of the game in their era? And so the name that immediately came to mind was Kobe Bryant, right? Now, Kobe, there's been a lot of arguments lately since his death that he should be really considered the second greatest basketball player of all time, not only because of his on-court prowess, but because of the impact that he had on the game off the court, right? He really started transitioning into this ambassador for the game of basketball. Needless to say, they're both absolutely fantastic, right? So I wanted to go through some things really that go to show you just how big of an impact Tim Duncan had on the game of basketball, while also showing you, hey, this guy's really not as appreciated as much as he should be, right? So let's take a look here, okay? Let's just talk about the things that are like cumulative, the things that are obvious to the eye, okay? So Tim Duncan had a player efficiency rating throughout his career of 24.2, which actually trumps Kobe Bryant's 22.9. Well, obviously that's going to make sense, because Kobe was famous for taking a high volume of shots, and they weren't always the best shots, but he would keep shooting night in and night out, shooting until he got hot, till he got in a groove enough to put his team in a position to make a run at the W each and every night. Tim Duncan was more Mr. Consistent. He was the big fundamental. Like I said, he'd back you down, turn around, kiss it off the glass. Not sexy, but adequate, right? So let's talk about some of the awards throughout the career, some of the things that really add up, the accolades, I guess, that give you the proof in the pudding besides the numbers. So Tim Duncan, like Kobe Bryant, was a 15-time All-NBA performer. Now, Tim Duncan, like Kobe Bryant, was also an All-Rookie. He was also a Finals MVP. Now, Kobe only won the Finals MVP 2 times out of championships. Tim Duncan actually went on to win Finals MVP 3 times. Not only that, Kobe Bryant was never a Rookie of the Year. Tim Duncan was the number 1 pick, so he was highly touted as an amateur, and he became highly as a professional his first year when winning the Rookie of the Year award in 1997-98. Now, like Kobe Bryant, he's a 5-time NBA champion. He is a 15-time All-Star, which Kobe was an 18-time All-Star, so he definitely takes the care. He was also an NBA MVP 1 time, just like Kobe Bryant, in the All-Star game. And then we're talking about season MVPs. Tim Duncan won the MVP award for the league twice, trump Kobe as well. Now, if you're asking me what guy I would rather have on my basketball to build around, if I was drafting him as a rookie, it'd be a pretty tough choice to decide between Tim Duncan on one hand, a 6'11", 250-pound power forward, or center. He bounced back and forth between the two. It'd be really hard to pick between the big fundamental and the Mamba, right? Not knowing what they were going to do in their careers. Hell, I still don't even know which one I would really pick if I was going to build a team knowing what they were doing or what they were capable of in their careers. Obviously, Kobe Bryant would be the sexy pick. He would be the highlight reel player that would put the butts in the seats. He would be primed for the big stage like he was in Los Angeles. Now, Tim Duncan played the smaller market. He had the quieter game, but it was not any less impact. Because one thing this guy was able to do, also that trumped Kobe Bryant, was make the all-defensive team in the NBA 15 times compared to Kobe's 12. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Tim Duncan was better than Kobe Bryant. But in terms of accolades and statistics, he does kind of trump Kobe a little bit. And there's an argument to be made for that, right? But he's definitely more decorated than any of the other power forwards in his class that are considered to be among the greatest of all time. And I just thought it was important to shed some light on that because Tim Duncan is absolutely fantastic. His game wasn't sexy. He gets lost in the mix. And it really goes a long way to lead why he's one of the most underappreciated players of all time, because this guy was a team player. He bought into Greg Popovich's scheme, and they were able to go on a run and have a lot of success together. Basically, the San Antonio Spurs are, I guess, famous for really introducing the NBA to their current style of play, because Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors have now transitioned the game into a wide open, fast moving, defenseless 3-point shootout. Whereas Tim Duncan's Spurs, they had some of those core principles in their ideology, but really they still played defense. So they were a mix between the old generation and the new generation that Steve Kerr basically put a modern twist on when he went over to Golden State and paired with Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, because those guys can shoot the lights out. But Tim Duncan was doing a lot of fantastic. David Robertson, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, and Tony Parker for a very long time. And we could talk all day about the impact that he had on the game, but he was absolutely fantastic, and he was definitely unappreciated. But I just want to congratulate Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Garnett on their selection to the Hall of Fame. I think it's an absolutely fantastic class, and I'm very excited to see the induction ceremony. So we'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to finish up talking about sports broadcasting and the rumors that analysts are chasing after Drew Brees, a guy whose career isn't even over yet. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Final Take. Welcome back to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott. We've had a great show for you guys today. We've talked about quarterback tiers in the NFL. We've talked about Derek Jeter's final game at Yankee Stadium, an absolutely breathtaking classic. And we also just got done talking about Tim Duncan and how he may be one of the most, if not the most, unappreciated players in the history of the NBA. Now, I want to switch gears here again for the last time. We're going to circle back to the NFL, but we're going to get off the field this time. So rumors came out yesterday that there's a handful of networks, basically CBS, ESPN, NBC, all pursuing Drew Brees as in-booth analysts for NFL games moving forward in the future, right? Now, Drew Brees just got done signing a 2-year, $50 million contract with the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is a guy who's definitely crossed that 40-year mark. He's getting a little bit older in his career, but like Tom Brady, he's maintained that he wants to continue playing. And as long as he's healthy, physically capable of making an impact and putting his team in a position to win, I don't see this guy getting off the field anytime soon. He's obviously going to continue to put the work in. He loves the game of football, and he holds most of the career NFL passing records, and we're going to see those grow, right? So it really made me think, are the networks jumping the gun by pursuing active players? And I'm not so sure how I feel about it, right? Because we all just saw a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, Tony Romo was given an $18 million deal over the next few years from CBS to be their in-booth analyst for football games, like on Sunday night and things like that. Now, Tony Romo is doing things in the booth where he's given a lot of freedom, right? He's recognizing coverages, he's recognizing plays, and he's doing things like calling out these plays live in game as they're happening. It's really fantastic for the viewer, and it's really fantastic to see the insight from a guy who played the position pretty successfully for quite a bit of time, right? Now, it just goes to show you the IQ of these modern players, because all the great quarterbacks in the modern era or over the past 20 years have all been notorious for being film junkies, right? So Tom Brady lives in the film room. Peyton Manning lived in the film room. Drew Brees lives in the film room. It goes on and on and on. These guys watch tape and they understand nuances, tendencies, they recognize coverages and hidden blitz packages, and they pick these things up in game, and it's what's allowed them to be so successful and why you've really seen passing stats inflate over the past 20 years. Not only are they calling more passing plays, from a playbook perspective on the sideline, but these quarterbacks are also recognizing these things at the line and making in-game audibles, shifting players around, putting their teams in the best position they can to be successful. Now, like I said, Romo got $18 million from CBS a little while ago, right? And then there were also rumors right after that ESPN has been pursuing Peyton Manning for a long time for a Monday Night Football in-booth position, which he's declined to take at this point, and that deal was rumored to be over $10 million, right? So what we have here is we're talking a lot of high dollars going around, a lot of pesos moving around for these personalities with a name who were fantastic quarterbacks. And the things that made them successful that we just talked about are really the things that are going to translate over into the booth and allow these guys to provide high-level analysis for fans, to provide a better in-game viewer experience. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I turn on a football game every Sunday looking for Tony Romo to call it, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I watched Monday Night Football for a long time just because I want to flip it on and listen to what John Gruden had to say. But it does add another layer or another element to the game, which is already fantastic. Football is probably the greatest game you will ever watch. And it's really instilled within us because it's the only game you really can't play after you're done, right? I mean, you can go get in a flag football league. You might be able to get lucky and get in an adult tackle football league, but those opportunities are few and far between. And let's face it, the older you get, your body can't hold up because the game is so physically demanding, right? So football is something we drool over every single year, and it's an absolutely fantastic product, which is further amplified by guys like Tony Romo getting in the booth. So we got Tony Romo at $18 million, and we got Peyton Manning rumored at being offered over $10 million by ESPN, right? Those salaries are either better or comparable to what they were making on an annual basis throughout their playing career at certain points, right? Which goes to show you the price we're putting on what is not a commodity at this point, because it seems like the NFL has really produced a lot of high-level quarterbacks over the past few years, and these are the guys getting high-dollar money. Now, there's a handful of guys out there. You see Deion Sanders all the time, Ray Lewis. Every year you have stars coming and going that are transitioning into these analyst jobs while they prepare to take the next steps in their life after they exit the playing field. They give us a nice perspective, right? Well, when I sit back and I think about all of it, Drew Brees right now is rumored to being offered $6 million per year, and he's not even done playing football yet. Like, let the guy enjoy his final years as an NFL football player, right? You can chase after him and hound after him for years to come when his playing days are done. But you don't need to be lining these guys up ahead of time and offering them contracts and money before they've even made the decision to transition into the next phase of their life. I think it's kind of rude, right? It's kind of like saying, hey, we recognize you're getting older and we think you're great from this perspective, even though you may not be as great from an on-field perspective anymore. What do you think about coming over and working for us? Man, the ESPN updates are running rampant today. My phone is going off. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. But back to Brees, right? I got a problem with it. I got a problem with these guys going after guys when they're not even retired yet, when they're still playing. And to me, really, I don't understand. It also kind of, I guess, provides a competitive aspect to the nature of someone in our field, right? Because I'm a sports journalist. I pride myself on being prepared, doing my homework, and I'm never going to know what it's like to be on field as an NFL quarterback. But I do plenty of studying. I do plenty of listening. And who knows, maybe one day, way down the line in a very distant future when I'm old and gray, I may be able to actually get in the booth for a game somewhere. You never know. Crazier things have happened, right? But I guess don't diminish the journalistic aspect of being in booth and calling a game, right? Because these guys are providing absolutely fantastic play-by-play analysis, pairing them with a guy who can be absolutely colorful from a journalistic sense, and you really do hit a home run as far as your on-air package that you're providing to fans. I just have a problem with going after the players before they've even retired. But I would love to see Drew Brees in the booth. I would love to see Peyton Manning in the booth. I love watching Tony Romo in the booth. And let me tell you this, I wouldn't be shocked if one day maybe even a guy like Tom Brady ended up in the booth. That's all I got for today. Thanks for listening to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott. Make sure you check out the podcast. It's available on any major platform, including Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google, and iHeartRadio. There's a lot of places out there you can get the content. Make sure you head over to YouTube. Check out the Platform Sports Media YouTube channel. There's a lot of content there as well. And make sure you follow me on Twitter at Michael Scott PSM. There's a lot of analysis, videos, updates over there. Well, it's been a fantastic day. I appreciate you guys listening in. Until the next time, have a great one.